We're on Daf Tes Amud Aleph. Let's get started. Let's get our bearings first, Rabbi Isai, as far as where we are in the Daf. There is the discussion of what kind of ratio do you need in order to create bittul of a forbidden substance. And so we're dealing with a machlokes right now between two Amoraim. One of them is named Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and the other one is Reb Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak. And the machlokes is it a 60-to-1 ratio to achieve bittul, or is it a 100-to-1 ratio to achieve bittul? They both learn out their ratios from the law of Hazaroa B'Sheila. Now, what is Hazaroa B'Sheila? The Torah says that one of the sacrificial offerings of a Nazir upon the completion of his Nazirism is that he has to take a ram and he has to cook the ram after Shechita with a severed foreleg of the ram. And the severed foreleg is given only exclusively to the Kohanim, and the remainder of the carcass of the ram is eaten by the bringer. But that foreleg is being cooked together with the carcass, and that foreleg is therefore a forbidden substance because it's only allowed for the Kohanim. So how can that be if you're cooking a forbidden substance with a permitted substance? How can it be that permitted substance is still permitted if it's being cooked with something that's not kosher? So the answer is because you have bittul. And the machlokes is, what is the ratio of mass between the foreleg of a ram and the rest of the ram? So the machlokes is, do you take into account the bones, which do not emit flavor, or not? So the opinion that says that you take into account the bone as well as the meat of the carcass says that it's a 60-to-1 ratio. The opinion that says that you only look at the meat mass of the ram says it's a 100-to-1 ratio based on the measurement only of the flesh mass and not of the bone mass in addition. Okay, is that clear? Everyone's got that background information, okay? So then, at that point, the Gemara then asks a question in yesterday's daf. It says, how can you tell me that the law of the Nazir Zeroa B'Sheila is a precedent for the laws of bittul? There's a brisa that says that this law of Zeroa B'Sheila is an exception to the rule, and everywhere else in the Torah, it's usur. So it seems like bittul doesn't work. It only works in an exceptional case of Zeroa B'Sheila. So the Gemara had given two answers yesterday, and now we're up to the third and final answer, which is the answer of Ravina. So we're on I think it's the eighth line on Daf Tes Amud Aleph, and it says Ravina Omar lo nitzracha elo lamakom chasach, da Omar makom chasach ba'alma aser v'hacha shari. So the answer, the Omar Mar is the girsa, makom chasach ba'alma aser v'hacha shari. So the answer that Ravina gives is that there is something exceptional, but not the rule of bittul. The rule of bittul applies in every forbidden substance situation, or in almost every situation. But what's exceptional about the Nazir's ram is that normally we say that if I'm dealing with a contiguous mass, that part of it is forbidden and part of it is permitted, and I cut off the part that is forbidden, then the place of the cut also has to be excised in order for the remainder to be permitted. I can't cut at the exact margin. I have to do an additional marginal cut within the permitted substance in order for the permitted substance to be permitted. It's like when you do surgery on a cancer patient, you got to take the margins, right? That's why they all talk about that. So that's normally the halacha when you want to try and excise a forbidden substance. But the unique feature of Zeroa B'Sheila is that you don't have to take those additional margins. And that's the chiddush of Zeroa B'Sheila. But as far as the laws of bittul, that's not exceptional. That's normative, and that applies both to the laws of the Nazir's sacrifice and to all other cases. So now let's go back to our discussion of whether you need a 100-to-1 ratio or a 60-to-1 ratio. So Yasiv Ravdimi u'ka'amar la hashmaita. So Ravdimi was repeating over this whole discussion, this machlokas, whether it's 100 or 60, and Amar le Abaye v'chol isurin shebetorah b'meya. So Abaye questions Rav Shmuel's suggestion that it's 100-to-1. He says, how could that possibly be? Let me show you a Mishnah that seems to contradict that. It says, "V'hatznan lama amru kol hamechametz u'metavel u'medameya lahachmir min umino, lahakul lahachmir min v'she'eno mino." So there's a Mishnah, we're coming into the middle of the Mishnah, but the Mishnah basically says as follows, that it's dealing with the laws of Truma. Now Truma is vis-a-vis a Yisrael is a forbidden substance. It's not kosher for a Yisrael. If it falls into regular chulin, regular kosher agricultural substance, so then the halacha is that you need a certain amount of chulin in order to make the Truma batel. In order to eat it, in order to consider it to be a permitted substance. So the Mishnah says that if the Truma substance that falls into the chulin is a mechametz, which means it's a leavening agent, or if it's a metavel, or if it's a spice, or if it's just something that falls in as a mixture, it's neither a spice nor a leavening agent, but it's mixed in and it's still detectable. So if it's min b'mino, if the two substances, the truma versus the chulin, are of the same species of product, which means, let's say, wheat and wheat, okay? So then we're always machmir, and we'll see what that means that we're always machmir. If it's, however, min v'sha'eno mino, if it's two substances of different species, so let's say one is wheat and the other one is beans, or something like that, so then sometimes we're makel and sometimes we're machmir. So that's very ambiguous, that statement. So now let's analyze it. So uketani seifa lahakul lahachmir min v'she'eno mino ketzad. So what does the seif of that Mishnah say? That if it's two different species, the truma and the chulin, so sometimes we're makel and sometimes we're machmir. So what is that? So grisen shenisbashlu im adashim. The example case is, let's say you have beans that are truma, that fall into a pot of cooking lentils that are chulin. Now, im yesh bahem benosein tam, bein yesh bahem lahalos b'meya ve'echad, bein ein bahem lahalos b'meya ve'echad aser. So the halacha is as follows. If the flavor of the beans is detectable in this dish, in this stew of lentils and beans, so then it doesn't matter what the ratio, as long as the flavor of the beans is still detectable in the lentils, so then the whole thing is aser, because it can't be batel as long as the flavor is detectable. Okay?
No matter what the ratio.
No matter what the ratio. And that means that even if there is 100-to-1 ratio, which is normally the ratio that you need in order to make truma batel, it doesn't make a difference since the flavor is detectable.
It's 1,000-1.
Yeah. Ein bahen benosein tam, but if the flavor is not detectable, bein sheyesh bahen lahalos b'meya ve'echad, bein ein bahen lahalos b'meya ve'echad mutter. So if the flavor is not detectable, so then you no longer need the normative 100-to-1 ratio, because as long as the flavor is not detectable, the lentils will be batel.
Do you mean 60-1?
Hold on. So hold on. So the Gemara now says, Ein bahem lahalos b'meya ve'echad elo b'mai. So the Gemara says, well, okay, I understand you don't need 100-to-1, but what ratio then do you need? So lav b'shishim. It must mean that the criterion is 60. So Abaye says, how could anyone possibly suggest that the normal ratio that you need is 100-to-1 when this brisa, which is commenting on the Mishnah, indicates that as long as the flavor is not detectable, you need less than 100-to-1, which implies the shear of shishim, not the shear of 100. So it's a kasha on Rav Shmuel, is essentially what the Gemara is saying. So the Gemara says, lo b'meya. So the Gemara says, no. We're sticking our ground, and really what the brisa is suggesting is you still need 100-to-1 ratio in order for it to be batel.
If there's no time.
Even if there's no time. The language of the language is very problematic, according to what we just read. However, we're going to get to that in a minute. But wait a minute. V'hamid dereisha b'meya haviseifa b'shishim. But 1 second. If you're telling me that the seifa, which talks about min b'she'eno minu, two different species, beans and lentils, requires 100, that's impossible. Because let's go back to the case of the first, which is min b'mino, which is when it's the same species. There it's clear, as I'm about to demonstrate, that the ratio is 100 to 1. And if there we said that you're always machmir, it must mean that by the min b'she'eno mino of two different species, we're more lenient than 100 to 1. So it must be 60. And let me explain to you what I mean. De ketani reisha lahachmir minu mino keitza. Because the Brisa says, let me illustrate what it means when we say that we're always machmir on min b'mino of two of the same species, where the truma and the CHULLIN are the same species. So'or shel chitin shenofa le'isas chitin. The illustration is yeast that's made from wheat, that's truma, it's a leavening agent, it falls into a dough that is made from wheat. Now, the halacha is, says the Brisa, v'yesh bo kedei lechametz, ben yesh bo kedei lahalos b'meya ve'echad, ben ein bo kedei lahalos b'meya ve'echad aser. So the Brisa says that if the leavening is detectable, if it acts as a leavening agent for the dough, then it's irrelevant how much a ratio you have between the dough versus the yeast. It's like tom, it seems, and therefore it's not going to be batel no matter how much you have. Now, ein bo lahalos b'meya ve'echad, but if there is less than 100 to 1 ratio, so bein sheyesh bo kedei lechametz, bein ein bo kedei lechametz aser, then it doesn't matter whether it is a strong leavening agent or not, it's going to be aser. And basically the distinction that we're drawing between min b'mino versus min b'she'eno mino is as follows. When it comes to min b'mino, you need to satisfy two criteria. Number one, it cannot be either leavening, it cannot have a leavening effect, and number two, you need a minimum of 100 to 1 ratio. Okay? But when it comes to min b'she'eno mino, so then you need to satisfy only one of two criteria. Either the flavor is not detectable, or you need 100 to 1 ratio, right? Or I should really say like this. By min b'she'eno mino, you can be makel as long as the flavor is not detectable. But if the flavor is detectable, then it's not going to be batel, but we're not concerned about ratio. So that's the reason why there's a distinction between min b'mino and min b'she'eno mino in this Mishnah. But the bottom line is that you see that ratio counts as 100 to 1 in min b'mino. So therefore, reisha v'seifa b'meya, question mark. So how could it be that both the reisha and seifa abide by the same criterion of 100 to 1 when there's a clear distinction that we can be more makel by min b'she'eno mino than by min b'mino? It must mean that it's less than 100 to 1 in min b'she'eno mino, and if it's less than 100 to 1, it must be 60 to 1. So the Gemara says, lo, reisha b'meya v'chad, v'seifa b'meya. So the Gemara says, no, you made a big blooper. You made a big mistake. You misread the Brisa. When the Brisa says it's 100 to 1 ratio, it's 101 to 1 ratio, because we read it as meya ve'echad, as 100 to 1. But rather the Brisa means 101 to 1. So it works out like this, that when it comes to min b'mino, in order for it to be batel, you need to have 101 to 1 ratio. But when it comes to min b'she'eno mino, as if the flavor is detectable, then no ratio will help. But as long as the flavor is not detectable, 100 to 1, there's just one less than 101 to 1, is acceptable to achieve bittul. And that's how we're defending Rav Shmuel. The difference between min b'she'eno mino and min b'mino is only one, a degree of 1. That by min b'mino you need 101 to 1, and for min b'she'eno mino you need 100 to 1, which is of course a bit contrived, it's hard for the Gemara to accept it. So the Gemara now says, but the Gemara says, okay, fine, we will go with that. But let me ask you a question going back on something that you just said. You said that when it comes to min b'mino, if there's enough yeast to leaven the dough, then it doesn't matter what ratio it is, it's always going to be aser. I don't understand why that should be. Normally, when it comes to truma, as long as you have 101 to 1, it's batel. There's no flavor. Why should its leavening ability create a stigma and disallow bittul?
So the Gemara says ishtik. So the person that was being asked the question was silent. He didn't have an answer. So Amar lei dilma shiny soor dechimutzo kashe. So he said maybe yeast is unique, and that its presence is aggressive, right? Because it's a leavening agent. And therefore, the Gemara says, like you had suggested, Shlomi, that it's just like tam. As long as it's detectable because it has an effect on the rest of the dough, so then it's going to not be bottle. And so Amar Lei, so he said back, ich gedenkt, ad kartan milsa de Amar Rabbi Yossi be Rabbi Chanina, lo kol hashiur in shavin. He says, you just reminded me what I once heard from my Rebbe, Rabbi Yossi be Rabbi Chanina, who said that even though the rabbis provided ratios of bittul, it doesn't apply to all substances. There are some substances where you will require more there because of their strength, right? Shaharei tzir shiuro karov l'masayim. And to illustrate, fish brine, which is from a non-kosher fish, sometimes needs 200 times of the permitted substance in order to make it bittul, much more than the normal amount of bittul. Ditnan dag tamei tziro aser, as the Mishnah says that a brine from a non-kosher fish, right, is aser, and Rabbi Yehuda Omer revias bisasayim. And Rabbi Yehuda says, how much do you need in order to make it bittul? If it falls into, let's say, you've got a pot of herring, okay, and you've got some brine from a non-kosher fish that falls into the herring mix with the onions and the juice and all that stuff. So how much do you need in order for it to be bittul? You need one revius falling into 2 sa'as, which Rashi says approximately that's 200 to 1. Now, the Gemara says, okay, you've proven your point. But now I have a separate question, which is Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says that you can have bittul as long as you can nullify the strength of that fish brine. But wait a minute. V'ha'amar Rabbi Yehuda min b'mino lo batul. Rabbi Yehuda is the author of the Shita, which we don't paskin like, by the way, but which is very prevalent throughout CHULLIN, that and other places in Shas, that if you have 2 of the same species, one is forbidden and one is permitted, there's never bittul, no matter how much ratio you have.
Even with no tam.
Even with no tam. Even with no chimutz. So how could Rabbi Yehuda over here say that the fish brine of a non-kosher fish can be bittul as long as you take away its strength?
200 to 1.
That's the question. So as long as you have 200 to 1, according to Rabbi Yehuda, it's never bittul. So the Gemara answers, Shiny tzir dezeya ba'almahu. So the Gemara says, the only time Rabbi Yehuda says that min b'mino is not bittul is when you have the original forbidden substance falling into permitted, a larger permitted substance. But if it's just the juice of the forbidden substance, right, it just absorbed like the brine, it just absorbed sort of like what the Gemara says, the zeya, the perspiration from the forbidden substance, or the extract of the forbidden substance. So then it's not the actual substance itself, and there Rabbi Yehuda will agree that even min b'mino will be bittul. Okay? Yeah.
Is bittul contingent on the taste? In other words, we give this number because that's mavatl the tongue. Is that the idea behind bittul?
The idea behind bittul when it's min b'she'eno mino is the tam.
So if you had a case where you had an original mutter substance which had a very strong taste, but you had a small proportion of the usher substance put into it, because the mutter substance overpowers the usher substance, you wouldn't need that number?
As long as the flavor is not detectable, because right, and the Shulchan Aruch actually even indicates, based on the Gemara, that you could give it to a non-Jewish connoisseur who can detect flavor, and as long as he can't detect the flavor of the forbidden substance, it's permitted. Now, that's a matter of halacha, but it's not practical halacha, because from a practical halachic position, midrabanan, you always need at least the 60 to 1 ratio, right? But from a standpoint of what me'ikar hadin, right? Technically, that would work as long as the flavor is no longer detectable.
And what about visibility? Is that not a factor?
Visibility is going to be a factor, as we're going to see in the Gemara shortly, that as long as you can tell where the substance is, you need to remove that. As long as the substance is still detectable,
either in flavor or visibility, you're going to have to remove it as well. So let's say you have a very bright green forbidden substance that gets mixed in with a kosher substance. You would have to extract it completely, even if the flavor was not detectable.
Obviously. Otherwise, you can never see it.
That's not always easy to do. It all depends on the nature of the mixture, right? Okay.
Rabbi, that's only min ki'enu.
That's min. No, it's
Min b'mino, you're not going to tell.
Well, it's a different color. It's a different color.
Let's say it's a different color. Let's say the forbidden substance had food coloring added to it or
So
something.
green beans and red beans is still min b'mino?
That's a good question. I think when we talk about min b'sheino mino, it has to have a different flavor. So it could be that it might be like, let's say, green peas and yellow peas. Look, there's a lot of questions that we can ask about this. So you're going to need to be patient in order to get more clarity as we go through the daf. So we're just getting a smattering of the laws of kashrus here and the laws of bittul.
Just a taste.
Yeah, just a taste. It's a detectable taste, though, and we'll get.
How come Reb Dimi did not ask him about tavlin? Why do you bring it for fish brine? In other words, something which is beyond, something which gives taste way beyond the 60 or 100. You could ask him to answer about tavlin.
Because that was the case that they were discussing. It was a Mishnah. It's a Mishnah talking about fish brine. It's a Mishnah in Maseches Trumas. So that was the case.
It says Rabbi Zudo.
Okay. Keitzad Misha'arina. So let's go back to the Mishnah. The Mishnah had said that if a person takes a leg of lamb, for example, and he cooks it, and by accident he didn't traber it yet. You know what a trabering is? Taking out the veins and taking out the sciatic nerve, the gid hanasha. So let's say he didn't take out the gid hanasha, and he cooked it in the meantime. Now, of course, through the cooking process, flavor permeates the surrounding tissue. So the question in the Mishnah is, can the thigh be permitted? So the Mishnah had answered and said that the thigh will only be permitted as long as you have a ratio of 60-1, right? Isn't that the case? What did the Mishnah say? In Yeshba benosein tam harezu asura. If the flavor is detectable, it doesn't tell me the amount. It says if the flavor is still detectable of the gid hanasha in the meat of the thigh, so then the thigh is forbidden. If not, then all you need to do is remove the gid hanasha after you cook it, and then the rest of the meat is permitted. Now, the Mishnah had then said, Keitzad misharin osa. Now, how are you supposed to sort of calculate whether or not the flavor is still detectable in the thigh? So it says, misharin osa kibasar belefes. It says what you have to do is, now obviously every substance gives off flavor to a differing degree. And the Mishnah had said the way you deal with it over here is that you imagine that the gid hanasha is a piece of meat, okay? And you imagine that the thigh meat is lefes, is turnip. And turnip is very absorbent. So it absorbs flavor, especially from meat. So if you were to take a similar ratio of a pot of turnips cooking with a forbidden piece of meat, and it's the same ratio as the thigh meat to the sciatic nerve, and you could still detect the flavor of the meat in the turnips, so then it's usr. But if it's such a small amount, such that the piece of meat, the flavor is not detectable in the turnips, so then it's mutter, and therefore the thigh meat will be mutter as well.
Basically, do an experiment.
You do an experiment.
Take some turnips and do equal volume and figure it out.
Right. And it's unclear why the Mishnah says this. Why don't you just give the thigh meat to a connoisseur and find out? But apparently the Mishnah says this is the process you must use in order to achieve heter, that it's the thigh meat is permitted. So Amar Rav Huna kibasar berashe lefatos, that it's, when we talk about turnip, it's not the carrot part of the turnip, but it's the root part of the turnip. It's the leaf part of the turnip. And Rashi explains that this is a leniency, in that because a turnip is bitter, when it cooks with meat, you can more easily detect the flavor of the meat, which tempers the bitterness of the root of the turnip. But when you cook the leafy part with meat, because the leafy part is a bit sweeter anyway, it's not as bitter, so then it's harder to detect the flavor of the meat. And therefore, it requires less it requires a smaller ratio, essentially, than the larger ratio of the root part of the turnip. Okay, so masnisin delo kehaitana, the Tanya Rabbi Shmuel ben Rabbi Yochanan ben Baroka Omer ein begidin beno seintan. So our Mishnah disagrees with another Tana. And this is a very important point because essentially this is what the Gemara's conclusion is going to be, that our Mishnah is not kahalacha, because there's another opinion, there's another Tana who says that you don't have to worry about the flavor emitted by the Gid Hanasha, because the Gid Hanasha does not emit flavor at all. It doesn't have flavor. And therefore you don't have to worry about ratios at all according to this Tana. Okay, just take out the Gid Hanasha and the rest of the meat is permitted. Now, Hahuda Asalakami de Rabbi Chanina have Yosef Rabbi Yehuda bar Zavina Abava. So two very interesting stories. There was a man who came before Rabbi Chanina with this very shaila, that he had accidentally cooked the leg of lamb together with the Gid Hanasha, and he wanted to know whether he could eat the leg of lamb after removing the Gid Hanasha. But Rabbi Yehuda bar Zvina was standing by the doorway, eavesdropping, trying to find out what the rabbi would answer. So kinafak amar lei my amar lecha, but he couldn't hear. So when this man left the room, he said. So Rabbi Yehuda said, "What did the rabbi say? What did the rabbi say?" So amar lei shar yani halei. He said it's mutter. So like most nudniks who stand at the door eavesdropping, what does this guy do? Amar lei hadar ayle lekame. Ask him again. He must not have understood the shaila.
Supposed to be friendly.
Because he's a nudnik and he's standing by and eavesdropping, right? You know how many times this doesn't believe it. You know how many times this happens? Anyway, I can't be. The rabbi doesn't know what he's talking about. Ask him again.
No, you didn't hear him right.
You didn't hear him right. You didn't tell it to him right. Amar,
You didn't ask the right
you didn't
question.
ask the right question. So right. So Amar man hai de kamitzareli. So Rabbi Chanina hears this nudnik shepherding the guy, and he says, "Who's chahaking me a chinik like this? Who is this guy that's giving me this anguish?" Zil emale lamandi Yosef abava ein begidin beno seintan. He says, "Tell the guy who's standing at the doorway that I paskin that the Gid Hanasha does not emit flavor, and therefore you don't need to have a ratio. It's perfectly fine." Now, ki asu lakame de Rebbe Ami. Another independent story the Gemara says is that a group of people once brought the same shaila to Rebbe Ami. Now this is even more astounding. So, Mishader lahu lakame de Rebbe Yitzchak ben Chalov de Moriba laheter mishum de Rebbe Shua ben Levi v'leilo svirale. So, you know what Rebbe Ami did? He said, "Listen, I don't want to answer your shaila. You know why? Because my tradition is to be machmir, to require a ratio. But I'm going to send you to another rabbi, Rabbi Yitzchak ben Chalov, because he has a tradition from Yoshua ben Levi that you don't need a ratio because the Gid Hanasha does not emit flavor. And let him paskin the shaila for you."
Wow.
Did you ever hear of this before?
Uh-huh.
Did you ever hear of this before? A rabbi who holds, really you should be machmer, but I'd rather not be machmer for you. Now you can make up the case yourself. Yeah. Maybe he saw this guy is poor. If I don't let him eat the leg of lamb, his family's going to go hungry for Shabbos. Or whatever the situation is. But do you understand from this story that it's not a mitzvah to be machmir? Even if you yourself hold that you have to be machmir, send the guy to someone else who you know will be mekel.
Wow.
Now, I want you to mark this page in your Gemaras, because it's next time someone tells you the other way, you'll show them, look at this story in Gemara and Chulin. What are you going to say about that?
This rabbi bent over backwards for the guy.
He bent over backwards, even though his own personal shita was to be machmir. I'll tell you when I use this. People come to me, Rabbi, do I hold 1 day or 2 days if I'm going to be spending Yantav in Eretz Yisrael? I have a Mesorah that you have to be machmir and hold 2 days if you're a ben chutz la'aretz. But I know that there are many Rabbanim now in Eretz Yisrael who are mekel. So I say, don't ask me the shaila, go ask the Rav in Eretz Yisrael. And I won't paskin. I won't paskin for people.
Which Rav do you know that I thought that a rabbi has even, that you have yourself your own ability to take into account of it if a guy's poor and he's going to go hungry.
Yeah, but he held, his shita was that if this thing emits flavor, you can't be lenient just because the guy's poor. I'm not prepared to be makel for you myself, but go to Rabbi so-and-so. I know that he's makel. Okay, v'hilchas ha'in begin b'nosatam, and the final halacha of the Gemara is that a git hanasha does not emit flavor, and so therefore the halacha is not like our Mishnah, but rather like that other time. Now, let's go weiter. Git hanasha shenis bashel. The next part of the Mishnah had told us that if a gid hanasha is cooking with other gidim, other permitted sinews, in a stew, doesn't sound very appetizing, but let's say that's the stew. So the Mishnah had said something very important. It said, when you have to first remove the gid, and then if the gid still emits flavor in the stew, so then it's asur, but if there's no longer flavor because there's so much more of the permissible substance than the gid, so then it's mutter. But the Mishnah said that that's only halachically true if the gid hanasha is removed. But if you can't find the gid hanasha, because it's already buried in the stew and you can't identify it, so then the whole stew is asur. And even though the flavor is not detectable. And the Gemara doesn't understand why. He says, V'liv tol beruba. He says, if there's no flavor to be reckoned with, then the ratio of 60 or 100 is no longer necessary, no longer compelling. And what do we rely on? Bittul berov. If something is batul berov, as long as it's not emitting flavor to asr the other permitted substance.
You don't have to find it.
Why should you have to find it?
Leave it there.
Leave it there. That's the question. So the Gemara says, beria shiny. Or like they say in yeshiva, beria. It's a mispronunciation from the yeshiva shavelt. But it's actually pronounced beria. So the Gemara answers beria shiny. That it's different when you're dealing with a fully intact substance. That is never batal, no matter how much the ratio is. What's the practical halachic example? Bugs. Bugs! People think, what's the big deal? It's such a tiny bug, of course it's batal.
It's the whole
Right?
bug.
If you have the whole bug, a bug is never batal. There's a machlokas whether, generally we understand this to be that it's not batal midir rabbanon. That seems to be the psak, that may have ramifications. But here's an interesting case. What if so if it's berries, and it's whole berries, you can't say, oh, the bugs are batal. You can't say that, because there may be whole bugs, and it's a bria, so that's different. But what if it's pureed berries? If it's pureed berries, then you can assume that the bugs are also pureed. So, no, I'll have a bug, but it's a pureed bug, so it's batal. Okay? And this has very practical ramifications. I heard a shir about this over 30 years ago from Rav Heinemann in Baltimore, about this whole issue about when you can rely on bittul to even lechatchila puree vegetables and berries and stuff like that. But we're not going to get into that now. V'chein chaticha shel nevela v'chulei, and then the Mishnah had said that the same halacha applies, just like we talked about the gid hanasha that falls into a stew of gidim, the same will apply if you have cubes of meat. And one of the cubes of meat is a treif, is a nevela, is a non-kosher piece of meat. It falls into a stew of other cubes of meat. So the halacha is that you must remove the nevela piece of meat in order for the rest of the stew to be permitted, even if there's no tam. Right? Even if you can't detect its flavor anymore because you have such a large ratio of the permitted stew. And again, the question is going to be, why do you have to remove the piece of nevela to the point where if you don't recognize it, the whole thing is asur? Why don't you say bittul berov? Again, v'ti batil beruba. So the Gemara answers, Hanicha laman da'amar kol shadarka limano shaninu, ela laman da'amar es shadarka limano shaninu ma'ika lameimar. So the Gemara says like this. We know this from Maseches Beitza also. The Gemara says that there are certain times where the rabbis say that something that is so important, it's not batal. Just like a bria is not batal, sometimes something that's really important is not batal. How do you detect its importance? If it's sold by unit and not by weight. If it's sold by unit, that indicates that it's an important, expensive commodity, and therefore it's not batal. Now, pieces of meat or cuts of meat sometimes are batal. Sometimes are sold by unit, and sometimes are sold by weight. So if you hold that even if something is occasionally sold by unit, then I can understand why this meat is not bottle and it therefore has to be removed. But if you hold that the only time something is not bottle is if it's exclusively sold by unit and not by weight, meat is something that is sometimes sold by unit and sometimes is sold by weight, so it should be bottle according to that opinion. So the Gemara says, "Ma'ikalim." So shiny chaticha hol uruya lihiskabed ba lifnei ha'orchem. The answer is that there's another compelling argument, is that even though meat is sometimes occasionally sold by unit and sometimes sold by weight, nevertheless, when it comes to expensive meat like filet mignon, so then in that situation, if it's pieces of filet mignon that are very expensive, then even if it's only occasionally sold by unit, it's not bottle because of another consideration, which is this is something that I gain honor from when I serve to my guests. And this is also codified in Shulchan Aruch, that if it's something that's so important that by serving it, you attain honor when you serve it because it's something that's so expensive and so special, so then it'll never be bottle, even no matter how much the ratios are. And the Gemara then finishes by saying this follows. I'll tell you why I needed both examples of the gid hanashe and the cubes of meat. He says, Di'i ashmi'inan gid mishum debriyahi aval chaticha emalo. Di'i ashmi'inan chaticha l'rui liskabe b'lifnei ha'orchem aval gid emalo tzricha. You need both because each one is unique. If I only told you the case of the gid hanashe not being bottle, you might have said, oh, it's only not bottle because it's a bria, it's a fully intact unit or organ. But whereas expensive cuts of meat, as long as they're not a full thing, that could be bottle, right? And if I only had the case of the expensive cuts of meat not being bottle, I wouldn't necessarily know a gid hanashe, which is not very honorable to serve, but it's a completely identifiable organ, and therefore it's not. Therefore, I wouldn't know. So I have to tell you both cases. Tell you whether when it's a bria and it's not important, or if it's not a bria and it's roy lihiskabed ba lifnei ha'orchem, that you get honor when you serve it to guests. In both cases, the forbidden substance is never bottled. This is where we'll hold it for today. Have a wonderful day.